Canada's dairy farmers are sitting on the edge of their seats, waiting to see if Donald Trump will follow through on re-evaluating NAFTA, which he says is, quote, taking advantage of farmers on his side of the border. Trump's main gripe with a system called supply management, which controls how much dairy product is produced in Canada and which dairy products can be imported. But how does it all work, and why is it ruffling American feathers so badly? Well, here to clear that up for us is international trade lawyer Milos Barutciski of Bennett Jones. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Anne-Marie.
All right, first of all, explain for us, break this down in simple terms. What is supply management?
Well, supply management is a scheme whereby instead of farmers being allowed to basically have as many cows and make as much milk as they like, and buyers buying it at whatever the market price, supply management is a system where the government allocates quotas, and actually there are dairy boards. The farmers essentially run the dairy boards, and they set a quota for how much milk each farmer can produce. That essentially sets a price for the market. It's not price fixing directly. What it is you say so much milk is going to be produced, and that essentially this is the supply. And the way we make sure that that's how much is produced and no more is to also make sure that's how much is available in the market. We also restrict imports by imposing tariffs that are very high. Upwards of 250, 300% and so forth. So that keeps the market essentially stable.
There's been a lot of complaints on both sides of the border around this issue, both sides saying, one side's more unfair than the other. But is this really as unfair for Americans as President Trump made it out to be? I mean, people who didn't talk about dairy imports before were certainly mad about them last week.
Well, there's some irony in listening to the Americans talk about the unfairness of it all. Leave aside the issue whether supply management makes sense for the Canadian industry. There are a lot of views on it, and the fact is it's lawful. It has been lawful for the 40 years that it's been here under the old GATT. It's lawful under the WTO agreements. It's lawful under NAFTA, and that's the way it is. From the standpoint of the Americans, the irony is that the Americans, we don't subsidize. We just basically have a regime that establishes the volume that's available in the market and directly establishes the price. What the Americans have is direct subsidies to their farmers, the dairy farmers. They have crop insurance subsidies. They have milk boards. They have some school milk subsidies. And guess what? They have state dairy boards that are, you know what? They're supply management. So the rank irony of Governor Scott what was his name, Walker of Wisconsin, saying, Canada has to respect its agreements if it wants fair treatment. Well, you know what? We are respecting our agreements. So while they are also doing very similar things to what we're doing.
While I have you here, I want to talk about softwood lumber. We're watching for a decision that's coming up tomorrow. But last week, a lot of people, their ears perked up when they heard Donald Trump lumping in softwood lumber as what he called making NAFTA a disaster. So first of all, what are we watching for tomorrow?
Well, tomorrow, what's happening tomorrow is there's a deadline for a preliminary determination of subsidization and dumping by the U.S.
What does that mean?
Well, that's right. What an anti-subsidy or countervailing duty is, it's a process that we have similar rules on this side of the border, where the government, the importing government, looks at the exporter and says, are you subsidizing the production, in this case, of softwood lumber from Canada? And if they are, the importing government, the U.S., imposes duties to make up the difference between the subsidy and what the price is before the subsidy. And the idea is to protect American lumber mills and lumber workers. What we have tomorrow is the preliminary decision. The way these things work is that there's a complaint by the U.S. lumber industry. The U.S. Commerce Department investigates, and the U.S. International Trade Commission looks at whether or not the U.S. producers are suffering injury, and then Commerce issues a preliminary determination of the amount of subsidy. It was a foregone conclusion. This is the 5th battle in a 25-year war we've had on softwood lumber in the United States. NAFTA is irrelevant. The last battle we had, resulting in the 2006 agreement, the U.S. essentially ignored every panel ruling that Canada won. Canada won almost all of them. And at the end said, oh, and by the way, when the panel said give back the $5 billion they'd collected, the U.S. says, well, we're not going to give it back until we want to keep $1 billion. If you want an agreement, we keep $1 billion. And they gave that to who? Half of it went to the U.S. softwood industry. So, This was a predetermined conclusion. It really has nothing to do with Donald Trump. Now, that's a separate issue, is whether he's going to go out to Oregon and Washington and take credit for it. He's taking credit for jobs that were established before he was elected. He takes credit for lots of things. But it was going to happen and play out the way it is tomorrow, regardless.
Milos, it is good to have you here, especially as we walk step by step through this renegotiation, potentially of several NAFTA deals. Thanks for being with us on your morning.
Thank you, Anne-Marie.
Clearing some of it up for us.